At 5:47 on the morning of May 11, 1945, Private First Class John R. McKinney woke to a flash of steel, an arc of cold metal cutting through the darkness. A Japanese officer's saber crashed against his skull, slicing a shallow groove across his scalp. The blow should have killed him. Instead, it only stunned him. McKinney was 24 years old, 5'7", a lean 130 pounds. He'd grown up hunting squirrels and turkeys in the pine forests of Screven County, Georgia. His father had taught him to hit moving targets without ever using the sights. "Your eye knows," his father would say. "Trust the instinct before the thought." That simple lesson, learned in quiet woods, was about to decide the fate of nearly 200 men. 8,000 miles from home, on the coast of Luzon, McKinney was part of Company A, 123rd Infantry Regiment. Their defenses were spread in a tight perimeter around a small outpost at Dingalan Bay. Before dawn, with the moon slipping in and out of cloud cover, the jungle looked like a landscape made of shadows, perfect for an enemy approach. 100 Japanese soldiers were closing in. 20 minutes earlier, McKinney and 2 others had completed a night shift at a light M1919A4 machine gun. Exhausted, McKinney had laid down only a few paces from the gun when the saber struck. He didn't think, his hand simply moved. His M1 Garand lay across his chest. He grabbed it and swung it like a club. The wooden stock smashed into the attacker's face. Before the man even hit the ground, McKinney chambered a round and shot a second soldier charging from his left. The crack of the Garand echoed through the trees, and the jungle lit up with movement. More attackers burst from the tree line. One of McKinney's machine gun teammates was already down, wounded in the first seconds. The third man dragged the casualty toward the rear, leaving McKinney alone. 10 Japanese infantrymen surged through the dark toward the machine gun position. They knew exactly what they were doing. 3 provided covering fire, while 7 sprinted the final yards to the gun. They reached it before McKinney could intervene, grabbed the machine gun, and began rotating it back toward the American lines. McKinney jumped straight into the emplacement. The space was barely 6 feet wide, 4 feet deep, fortified with sandbags and palm logs. 10 enemy soldiers were crowded around the captured weapon. McKinney raised the Garand and fired point-blank, 3 feet, 1 shot. A man dropped. He worked the action, fired again and then again, 7 rounds in 8 seconds. 7 men fell in a tight circle around the machine gun. The remaining 3 turned on him. No time to aim, no time to fire. He used the rifle the way he'd used it seconds earlier, like a club. The butt smashed into one man's skull. McKinney reversed the swing, slammed the stock into another man's throat. The third lunged at him with a bayonet. McKinney parried, shoved forward, and drove the rifle butt into the attacker's chest. All 3 collapsed. The fight had lasted less than 2 minutes. 10 men dead. The machine gun destroyed in the struggle. Spent casings, blood, splintered wood, and torn sandbags covered the ground. And outside the position, more enemy soldiers were moving through the jungle. The main assault hadn't even begun. McKinney ran back toward the perimeter, took cover behind a massive fallen dipterocarp tree roughly 4 feet thick. It could stop rifle fire, but not mortars. He checked his rifle. 1 round left. He dropped the partial clip. A fresh 8-round end block snapped into place with a familiar metallic ping. He had 7 more clips on his belt. 56 rounds. Against 80 to 100 attackers. The numbers weren't on his side. At 5:53 a.m. the next wave emerged, 15 men advancing in a loose skirmish line, moving slow and smart. These were veterans. They were using cover, pausing, scanning, closing the distance deliberately. McKinney waited. 40 yards, he fired. The man dropped, shift, fire, another hit. The rest went to ground as grenades began arcing toward McKinney's position. 4 explosions shook the earth. Dirt and splinters rained over him, none close enough to wound but close enough to force him down. As he stayed low, the attackers pushed forward. He rose, fired 3 quick shots, 2 hits, 1 miss, and ducked again as bullets slammed into the fallen log. The wood absorbed the 7.7 rounds with heavy thuds, but it wouldn't last forever. Mortar fire was next. So he moved. He crawled along the fallen tree, then slipped into a shallow depression. 18 inches deep, just enough to hide him. He made it to a supply area behind a cluster of rocks where ammo crates were stacked. He grabbed 2 bandoliers, 120 more rounds, hanging them over his shoulders, the weight pulling at his neck and chest. At 5:58, the first knee mortar shell landed, 30 yards away. Then 25. The enemy was walking their fire toward him. He sprinted, diving behind a palm just as the next round detonated exactly where he'd been seconds earlier. Another wave appeared at the tree line. 8 men, spaced evenly, proper assault intervals. He aimed at the lead soldier, exhaled slowly and squeezed. The man folded. Shot, shift, shot, shift. McKinney fired with the same instinct he'd honed in Georgia forests. 5 of the 8 went down. The rest broke off and retreated. And so it went. Small groups advanced. McKinney fought them off. He changed positions constantly, never staying more than 2 minutes in one place. He reloaded endlessly, firing 8 rounds, ejecting the empty clip, slamming in a new one in under 4 seconds. Faster than the bolt-action rifles the Japanese carried, faster than they expected. By 6:14 a.m., McKinney had burned through 6 clips, 48 rounds. He reached a 5-foot-tall termite mound that offered excellent cover and a clear field of view. He decided to hold it. More attackers rushed. 3 sprinted across the open ground. He hit the first at 40 yards, the next at 35. The third made it to a rock just 15 yards away, grenade in hand. The pin was already pulled. McKinney fired. The man collapsed backward. The grenade rolled from his fingers. 3 seconds. The explosion tore the ground apart where the soldier lay. Behind McKinney, he heard American voices. 8 men from Company A, sent forward when the machine gun position stopped firing. They spread out around the termite mound, forming a defensive arc. 1 soldier ran back to headquarters to report the situation. The Japanese assault finally cracked at 6:31 a.m. The survivors fell back into the jungle, carrying their wounded with them. American soldiers pursued briefly, then returned to secure the perimeter. McKinney stayed where he was, breathing hard, hands shaking from adrenaline, sweat stinging the wound on his scalp. He still had 4 clips, 32 rounds. When daylight fully revealed the battlefield at 7:00 a.m., the count was grim. 40 Japanese bodies lay around the machine gun emplacement and the surrounding ground. More had likely been dragged away. Company A had lost 3 men killed, 7 wounded. If the Japanese had broken through that section of the line, the entire company, 127 men, could have been wiped out. The battalion commander later estimated that McKinney's actions had saved between 50 and 70 American lives directly, and prevented the collapse of positions, protecting nearly 200 more. He was promoted to sergeant and recommended for the Medal of Honor. On January 23, 1946, President Harry Truman handed him the medal in a brief ceremony at the White House. When Truman asked what he planned to do after the Army, McKinney simply said he intended to go home and hunt and fish in Screven County. Truman told him America needed men like him. McKinney returned to Georgia 3 weeks later. He never married, never sought attention. For 51 years he lived quietly, hunting deer, tracking turkeys, fishing the Savannah River and avoiding the spotlight. When reporters found him, he always said the same thing. He did what was necessary, and he wished he could forget the war. In 1995, his fellow veterans organized a reunion. They had trouble finding him. No phone, no responses to letters. Eventually, one man drove into Screven County and located him through local hunters. McKinney agreed to attend. When they told him he had saved their lives, he only nodded and said he was glad they made it home. Georgia later named part of State Route 21 the John R. McKinney Medal of Honor Highway. At the ceremony, McKinney spoke for just 3 minutes. Courage, he said, was not the absence of fear. It was acting despite it. He asked people to remember the men who didn't make it home. John R. McKinney died on April 5, 1997, at age 76. He was buried with full military honors. Veterans from the 33rd Infantry Division stood beside his grave as an honor guard fired 3 volleys and a bugler played taps. His M1 Garand, the rifle that had saved nearly 200 lives in a single desperate morning, was laid across his casket. His actions at Dingalan Bay are still studied at Fort Benning today, proof that in war, sometimes a single soldier with enough skill, enough will, and enough stubborn refusal to surrender can hold the line against impossible numbers. On May 11, 1945, a Georgia hunter stood alone in the pre-dawn jungle and refused to give up the ground others depended on him to hold. And he held it.